Today's ruling on the situation in Gaza. I'm joined by the UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories, Francesca Albanese. She's joining us from Tunis. Very good to have you with us on Al Jazeera. Thank you very much. The International Court of Justice didn't specifically call for a ceasefire, didn't address that in its ruling. How optimistic should people in Gaza be after this?
Hi, Rod. I understand the frustration and despair of the people in Gaza who just needs to see the end of this horror, the end of the hostilities. At the same time, I'm quite positive on this hearing and what the court ordered, because it's first of all, it has dismissed Israel's request not to consider the case. It has recognized the plausibility that what Israel is doing might breach the Genocide Convention, constitutes genocide, and the court has precisely referred to genocide as the denial of existence of a people, of the Palestinian people. So the recognition that what Israel is doing amounts to this is incredibly important, because eventually genocide, the way I see it, genocide is the rather dormant gene of settler colonialism, which is the overall context in which the current assault against Gaza inscribes itself. And the court has recommended a number of measures that signify a complete U-turn compared to what Israel is doing. It means to cease killing of people, destruction of civilian infrastructure, particularly hospital, ceasing starving the civilians in Gaza. So ultimately, what the court is ordering is that what Israel has been doing until now is brought to an end. And by recognizing the plausibility of genocide, the court puts a clear obligation, also reminds of a clear obligation that member states have to prevent genocide. So in my view, from a state responsibility standpoint, member states are called to put pressure for a ceasefire, because there is no other way to end all these other than a cessation of hostilities.
You mentioned, and I hope I'm getting this right, you mentioned earlier that you saw this kind of violence as part of, I think it was settler violence, might have been the phrase that you used. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. But of course, that is something that we're seeing in other parts of the occupied territories as well, in the occupied East Jerusalem and, of course, in the West Bank. This ruling is focused on Gaza, but where does that leave the Palestinians in the rest of the occupied territories?
Precisely. Of course, what the Palestinians in Gaza are experiencing is an unprecedented escalation of violence that ultimately is not new, in the sense it has been there through and through the decades of occupation that the Palestinians have experienced in the occupied Palestinian territory, and the violence that the Palestinians as a people have endured for 75 years. I mean, the fact that South Africa brought the Nakba at the very beginning of their oral submission to the court is so significant, and it places what is happening today in a broader historical and still enduring context. Indeed, what's happening to the Palestinians in the West Bank is certainly lower in terms of intensity, but again, they are experiencing forced displacement, summary executions, settler violence. So it's the overall context of the occupation, which has been a conduit of settler colonial practices, that is put in question today.
This ruling is binding, but it's not enforceable by the ICJ. Just because of the way it's structured, it has to go to the UN Security Council for any enforcement action or support to take place. How do you think that this is going to resonate with those allies of Israel that have been supporting it through the action it's been taking? I'm thinking, obviously, of the United States, particularly, which has exercised its veto on several occasions.
I think that it's going to be more difficult to to defend Israel's stance. And it's true that the United States have often used their veto power to prevent basic measures of justice. But I think it's going to be different for European countries, which have a clear stance on respect for international law. So I do expect changes, but of course, those who are active in the human rights community needs to remain vigilant and continue their action to put pressure on their governments. And I would say not just in the West. This is something that needs to resonate, as South Africa has shown us, needs to resonate across the world. This is a global test for international justice, and it applies to the West as to the rest, including Arab countries.
Francesca Albanese, we appreciate you being with us on Al Jazeera, ma'am. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you.